This week's teaching challenge features the Sunday Times columnist and best-selling author Rachel Johnson. She's at Holland Park School in West London, Britain's first comprehensive, opened in 1958.
I've brought not all my shopping from the Portobello market, but every single word, well, give or take a few boring magazine articles I've ever published in hard copy form to show the kids. Am I allowed to say kids, or is that patronising these days?
The kids Rachel will be hoping not to patronise are Year 8 English, normally under the tutelage of the school's head of English, Rachel Hare.
Remember exactly what's happening this lesson. You're going to have a guest speaker coming through.
It's really the most frightening thing I've ever done, and I've done a lot of quite scary things, like going on question time with cabinet ministers. And I didn't sleep last night. I lay awake thinking, help. And in the morning I asked my teenagers what I should, and they just looked at me and they said, Mum, just don't try and be funny. Don't try and get down with the kids, okay? And none of them read newspapers, okay? Only the neeks read newspapers, so forget it. Anyway, it was awful. So this is easily the biggest challenge. Really, I'm not just saying that. This is the biggest challenge I've ever had.
The subject of Rachel Johnson's class will be journalism, and before the I's are dotted and the T's crossed, she has a briefing session with Rachel Hare.
SAT's a year early, so what they're studying this year is a media qualification in a year, which we would ordinarily put GCSE students through. It's a BTEC vocational media qualification.
So this is a bright lot, and they've done the SATs that the Labour's just scrapped.
They have done them
so
already.
So that's the news story I want them to look at, so that they may have some.
They'll certainly have opinions, lots and lots of opinions.
Good, okay, perfect.
Yeah. But also they're very able, they're very articulate. That's something you should probably know before you go in. And they're fascinated by the use of media. It's what they're studying at the moment.
Okay, well they can probably teach me more about new media than I can teach them. As you see, I'm an old dinosaur. Are you going to be watching the class and sort of assessing it?
I am. Well, not assessing, but I'll be next door monitoring the class. And we'll just be checking to make sure that they're engaged, stimulated by the materials, and to watch the techniques that you're using.
Techniques?
Okay. The teaching techniques that you're using.
Any last tips before I go in?
I think just to be as relaxed as possible and to show them how interested you are in the material that you're teaching, so that they see that enthusiasm for the subject. And the class will be arriving shortly, so I'll leave you to it.
But will our novice teacher have to eat her well-chosen words as the time arrives to turn theory into teaching practice? Next door, Rachel Hare takes up position to monitor the lesson.
I'm Rachel Johnson, and I'm a journalist. Can you hear me? Yeah. I also write novels, but I'm here to talk to you about journalism and a bit about the media today. I know that you're going to make the new media, and I'm, in a way, a representative of the old media, the print media. So I'm here to tell you a bit about getting the writing right, and essentially about newspaper writing, which is an art. It's completely different from fiction writing. So I have always wanted to do this, hand out sheets to a class. Hamza, would you like to hand these out?
I tend to find with worksheets that it works better if you put them face down on the desk and talk about them before students start to read them, otherwise you lose their interest.
What you've got there is a story from today's Guardian and one from today's Daily Mail. So what I want you to do very quickly is to read 4 paragraphs of the Guardian story and the whole of the Mail story. Who can summarise in one sentence what's happened today to me?
Some guy called Ed Balls told Parliament his plans for sweeping changes to national testing systems.
Okay. The government yesterday scrapped SATs testing for 14-year-olds. You can almost summarise that story in 6 words. Right up top, if you're writing a news story, who, what, where, when, why. Which is the next most important paragraph after the first one? Anyone? Go on.
The last paragraph, because it's the paragraph they've read most recently.
No. Any other thoughts on that?
I think maybe the paragraph after the introduction, because it's when you start the story. The introduction is sort of
Is
a
the
summary.
right answer. The first paragraph is your most important. The second paragraph is the second most important. The third is the third most important. If they're cutting your story, the people who are editing your story cut from the bottom. So don't put anything important at the bottom. Put it up. Bring it all up top. Most important things. Now, what I want to do next is interpretation, because never believe anything you read, especially in the English papers, which are all competing for your attention. This story is a very good example. It's quite a straightforward story, but both these newspapers have, I think, treated it slightly differently. And I want you to look at and tell me what you think are maybe one or two words which suggest a different interpretation of what happened yesterday. You.
The Mail story seems more biased because it says, even in the first paragraph, a humiliating U-turn.
Yes! Who else can find anything? Yeah?
Radically overhauled.
I'm not letting you have that. Can somebody else come up with something?
The material that she's chosen is perfect. She might think about the pace a little.
There's one I think that's crying out. Yes, you.
Fiasco.
Yes is the one I was looking for. Because it says to you, you know, the whole thing with SATs was a fiasco. It's basically saying the government's incompetent. Instead of telling you what happened, it's telling you the government's incompetent. It's quite difficult when you're starting out reading newspapers. You don't know you're actually being indoctrinated at the same time. But I think this shows very clearly that the British press is highly politicised. And if you don't have an...
Before moving on to her next exercise, Rachel has a timely warning for young journalists.
Sued for a lot of money. So accuracy, always check what you've written. Never put a quote into someone else's mouth. You are putting your own head on the block. What we're going to do, have a read of that as quickly as you can. I think this is quite a difficult exercise. Who thinks this is a cracking news story? Who thinks it's a rubbish news story? Right, now you've got to work now and tell me, why is this a rubbish story? And every time somebody makes a brilliant suggestion, I'm going to give them one of these excellent Guardian guides to journalism.
Brilliant. Incentives or bribes, always very popular with our students.
You.
I don't think it's that good because when I was reading it, I didn't find it very clear, and I'm not sure if the bottom paragraph is the story. So if it is, maybe they can make it clearer by putting.
Congratulations. You.
Because at first I thought it was an adult or something, and it didn't really tell you how they crashed.
Right. So what is who, what, why, where, when? They haven't observed that rule that we talked about earlier.
Motor parts.
We don't want motor parts in that story. Go on.
Lucky day.
Well done. Daniel.
Unfortunately.
Well, it's an adverb, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Now, there's so much wrong with this that it's hard to know where to start. But who's got the balls to try and come up with the intro to this story?
I certainly would be wary of the use of language. That's something that we wouldn't encourage.
We can all work towards it, but can anyone have a go? You.
2 children have just left hospital after being hit by an HGV truck which veered off the road after a near collision with a police car.
I would say that was 80%. Anyone else? Yep.
2 children suffered from an intense car chase sequence along Wesley.
Someone's a Sun journalist in the making. Go on.
Along Wesley Street with an HGV and a police car.
Okay, what do you think should come out of that?
Intense car chase.
Well, you see, it's inaccurate, isn't it? It wasn't terrible because they weren't hurt. You've got to be accurate. Otherwise, write fiction.
You have to appeal to these people.
No. No. It's always tempting to exaggerate because you want to get the attention. You want your story to be read, but it's a bad way to go. I think this is a really hard exercise. It's a Guardian exercise that they set university students. So you're really up there. I'm incredibly impressed.
As the end of the class approaches, Rachel gets out her gargantuan scrapbooks to show the class her work.
To the Foreign Office, but I failed. And then I wanted to become a trainee on the Times. and I didn't. I failed. I regret that you have not been selected, but
I think it's so brilliant for students to see somebody's work and rejection letters. That's a really important element of the media that they need to understand.
Guys, everyone back to your seats, and I'm going to leave the journalism guides here, okay, so you can just pick them up if you want them, because I think you've got another class. I'd love you all to try and do some journalism, even if you don't do it as a profession, because it's a muscle, and you need to start using it now. Thanks a lot, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and get going. Start your writing.
The class seemed to like it, but what's the verdict of the professional? Rachel goes next door to hear the comments of the school's head of English, Rachel Hare.
Well done. How did you find it?
I don't know how you can do that for however many hours a day you do it for.
Well, four times a day for an hour and 15 minutes.
4 hours. Aren't you a husk at the end of the day? It's quite a physical thing, isn't it? Because you have to monitor the class the whole time. And it's also very difficult to know which pupil to pick when they've got a lot, which is nice when a lot of them are putting up their hands, and you feel this awful sort of pressure. You want to go for someone you haven't gone for before.
That's true, and there were 3 or 4 students who were dominating, and that's a natural thing in every class. Yeah, certainly. So you could have very easily taught the same lesson, but as a series of written exercises or group exercises where it was a competition between groups, because they are particularly able and they are competitive. They are. And you might have found that you could then step back and monitor what's going on in the room rather than constantly engaging in one-to-one dialogues where you couldn't
I think that maybe I'm used to giving talks and things, and so I always sort of feel I've got to be there, the giving value.
Students do enjoy it when you catch one another out, when you catch a student out, and they do like to see that that there's an opportunity that you may ask them next, and to keep them on their toes that way, because I think there was a little bit too much freedom for them to do what they wanted while they were there. But they were engaged by the lesson. I think you would have been far more successful had you started with the ending of the lesson, and that they would have been engaged.
I broke my own rule, which was I saved what was the most interesting thing for them till the end.
But I don't think that it stopped them from learning anything. I do think that it might have been helpful
to... It might have sparked a bit more interactivity about different sorts of things you could write for and different sorts of articles and things.
And also set you up as the expert, because I think it's really important that students see you as the expert voice within the room. A wonderful experience for them, and thank you so much for coming to talk to them.
More than wonderful experience for me. Terrific learning one. Thank you.
Well, I thought it was a very intriguing experience. The lesson was very different because it's not a normal teacher, and it was her first time being a teacher, but I think she was very successful.
Well, Rachel, she's teaching for her first time. So, yeah, she was very confident, and she asked us a lot of challenging questions.
I was surprised by how much she'd done, so it made me think about all the different things that I could do if I took that career path.